Hello, everybody. I think we'll give folks just a few more minutes to see who else might be joining, and then we'll get started. There we go. That's the signal that we ought to get started. Thank you, Danielle. Good morning, everybody. I'm Leslie Seberg with PPL, and welcome to the PPL Reseed Virtual Information Session. We're all terribly gratified by the interest in this project. It's been something that PPL has been working on for the better part of a year. And we're thrilled to be at this point where we're able to offer the first set of buildings through offerings to the community for resale. And just know that in addition to these 9 buildings, we do have additional product that we will begin working on in 2025 and 2026. Before we get started, I do want to just introduce the team and maybe our folks, everybody that's sort of associated with this. Put your face up on the screen for just a minute so you can wave when I point you out. I'd like to introduce Leah Hargett with JOG Associates. She has been instrumental in helping us put together the RFQ and to really think about how we're releasing these buildings to the community. Couldn't have done it without her. If you were in attendance at Monday's session, she's sort of the brain trust behind that project. I'd like to introduce Daniel Garnier, who is supports my boss, Carla Henderson, and kind of keeps us all together, and is going to as well today be capturing notes in the chat so that we can go ahead and release, information to the group, because any question is going to be a good question. More than one person will have it. And so we're going to capture this information and try to answer it on the website as well. I'd like to introduce Henry Rucker. You all know who he is, I'm sure. Henry, wave at us. He is helping us, has helped us and is helping us with the for sale process. He has brought us the realtors who will be working on this project. Let's see, I see Mina Leone, who's a realtor who will be taking on and selling a couple of the projects. Denise Mazone. Hopefully I'm saying your last name correctly, Denise. We have Trey Adams and also John and Matt Schuster, who are the realtors on our end that will be hosting the open houses and working on the closings on our end. I also saw that Gretchen Nichols is here with LISC. They've been super helpful in giving us PPL some funding to get this project off the ground. Also, I'm sure that many of you have been through the LISC cohort of for emerging developers as well. And then also, I do believe that Irene Ruiz-Bruseno is here from GMHF. And they also have been tremendously helpful in taking a look at the RFP, or actually I should call it the RFQ, and helping us think through how this project would go together, what kind of funding we might be able to put together, that kind of thing. So just a lot of people, a lot of community support from the development community and the real estate community in putting this project together. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and start walking through the slide deck. Oh, a couple of housekeeping items, forgetting about that. Please put your questions and comments in the chat. Danielle will be capturing that information. If we have time at the end of the presentation, we'll start to answer those then. Otherwise, as I said, go ahead and put things out on the website. So now I'm going to take myself off of the screen as well. And we'll go ahead and walk through the presentation. So let's go to the first slide, Danielle. The Joe Savaggio Initiative, which is the first group of properties that we're releasing through PPL Reseed, was a project that was created in 2000 as a community development response to derelict and underutilized housing resources in the Phillips neighborhood. In the mid-1990s, the real estate market to some extent collapsed. A lot of these buildings were either, as I said, derelict or underutilized, and the city of Minneapolis, as well as partners like Abbott Northwestern Hospital, Children's, some larger organizations that were in the neighborhood came to PPL and said, we really need to do something to make sure that these housing resources are not lost. So PPL, with financing from MHFA, the City of Minneapolis, and the Family Housing Fund, put together a package. We utilized low-income housing tax credit program to provide equity, and we embarked on a substantial rehab in 2001. The portfolio of buildings, there's 9 of them. They range in age, physical age, between 38 and 130 years. At the time of the substantial rehab, we did everything from windows to roofs to boiler systems. We did interior unit rehabs. We did work on the exterior of the buildings as well. Which to some sense, we are now doing again before we are putting these units on the market. It is important to call attention to the fact that this project does have low-income housing tax credits, otherwise known as LIHTC, has equity in the deal, which means that they are deed restricted through 2030 as affordable rental units at 60% of the area median income. We'll go into that a little bit more a little later in the presentation. But that deed restriction will lift December 31st, 2030. Although there will be certain rent protections provided to in-place residents through December 31st, 2033. And really simply what that means is that existing households at December 2030 will have the expectation and the right to have their rent remain affordable for a remaining 3 years. And that's just a program requirement. So let's go to the next page here. The PPL reseed goals. We have a relatively large portfolio of smaller buildings, duplexes, quads, sixplexes, in some cases 12 or 20 units in our portfolio that are based on PPL's current trajectory in terms of bringing on new units every year in larger buildings are just properties that we feel at this point in time might be better managed by smaller owner operators, managed more efficiently, managed more cost effectively. And so we are in the process of systematically improving these small properties within the PPL portfolio so that we can go ahead and release them through additional RFQs to BIPOC developers who are interested in owning and managing housing and want to get their foot in the door with some smaller projects. The PPL, as I mentioned, is intending to sell these to qualifying buyers from the community as meaningful asset and wealth building opportunities. We are looking to do this as cost neutral transactions to PPL, meaning that, for example, with this first release, we have obtained appraisals or broker's opinion of value on the buildings. So we have set the price for the building. We are not looking to get into bidding competitions with folks. I didn't want to use the term bidding war, but I guess that's just the best term I have. We are setting the price on these projects based on what we believe is a reasonable value. We are asking our lenders in some cases to forgive interest so that we have funding available to make improvements to the buildings and for PPL to come out as a cost neutral. We're not looking to we're looking to repay ourselves, but not looking to make money on the deal. And then lastly, we are wanting to preserve affordable rental housing units for residents and families in the community, at least through 2033. So I just want to drive home again that these buildings will be occupied at the time that they are available for sale. And that the residents in these buildings have rights under the LIHTC program for affordability, and those kinds of things. So let's go to the next slide. The eligibility criteria or definitions for folks that may submit an application through the RFQ. Emerging developer means a person of color who self-identifies as belonging to a racial minority group. I'm just going to read this because I want to make sure I cover it all. Two, we're looking for folks that have a demonstrated experience with at least 1 year duration with multifamily properties. And that could take the shape of a number of different things: managing or owning multifamily buildings, working for a developer who is doing affordable residential development, or some sort of commensurate experience. Maybe community development would be a good example. But folks who have been in and around the affordable housing world, or at least the world of real estate. So I suppose another option there would be somebody who has been selling real estate as well, would be, I'm assuming, qualifying. Buyers must be able to operate under a legal business entity that does not own more than 5 rental properties, current rental properties, or 25 units. Because we really are looking at this as a project or a program that is for folks wanting to get into the real estate market, not folks that already have a pretty firm footing. So we're looking for sort of that slide. I'm sorry, my light goes up here. So we're looking for that target, that slice of the market of folks that maybe have some experience, but not a great deal of experience, or actually a balance sheet with several assets on it. You must be anybody who is buying must be eligible to obtain a a rental license through the city of Minneapolis. The required developer owner contribution will be a minimum of $75,000 in equity. That can come into the project either from a buyer's just a balance sheet, something that you have already tucked away, or it can come through pre-development funds through a lender. It can come through a number of different sources, and we are not necessarily identifying how you'll come up with the $75,000 in equity, but that is kind of our baseline of what we're looking for. Because we do want to make sure that we've got folks that are relatively qualified to complete the transaction. We're looking for folks that have sufficient liquidity and understanding of financing so that a buyer will be able to manage M&O expenses over the course of the project of owning it and being able to have either, like I said, liquidity or access to funds if I'm trying to think what a good example would be. Maybe you have a resident who has lived hard on a unit and you need to, replace a tub surround or a toilet or the kitchen cabinetry, those kinds of things. We just want to make sure that folks have an understanding of what maintenance and operating expenses look like, and that they have resources to be able to manage that once they own the buildings. And then lastly, we are at this point in time requiring that our buyers obtain their own lending source for financing the property. That's not something that we are able to help with, don't have resources lined up for buyers. Let's go to the next page now. I feel a bit like I'm operating in a vacuum here, folks, by not allowing questions while we're going through the presentation, but we do just want to make sure that we get through it all. For those of you that attended the release on Monday, you received a packet of information that has offering sheets for all of the buildings that comprise JSI, or we refer to it as JSI, but Joseph Baggio Initiative. For those of you who weren't able to make the presentation on Monday, this information is available on the website. And we just wanted to walk through for folks how to read the offering sheet on each of these buildings. And so I've just pulled up a representative one here. It is for 615 East 27th Street. This building and 627 are over near the American Swedish Institute. They are a set of brownstones that were built in, I should call them brownstones, but brick buildings that were built in 1912. The appraised value, and we did have an independent appraiser appraise these buildings in April, priced this building at $630,000. So that is what we are hoping to get in offers on the sale. We did substantially rehab the buildings in 2000. That information I'm not so sure was on the offering sheet, but I just wanted to make sure that folks know that at that time we did. So the building was built in 1912. We did substantial rehab in 2000. We have done work on the building before we're releasing it now. It's a quad. It is 4 units. They're all 2-bedroom, 1-bath units. The current monthly rental income, meaning money that PPL is currently getting on charging existing residents, is $48.75 per month. We felt it was important to let you know that these buildings were initially financed with a loan from the city of Minneapolis that required that we PPL for the first 25 years of the deal lease to units at 50%, or to residents at 50% of AMI. That is lifted. The only restriction at this point in time that remains on these buildings in terms of income and rent restrictions is the tax credit restriction, and those are 60%. So PPL has not yet moved these rents up market to 60%, but there is potential on monthly income to boost the production, I guess, or the rental production on these this building to $6,400 per month. And we'll go through a rent calculation later as to how we get to that. But we did want to include that bit of information on each of these offering sheets so that you understand that there is some upside in terms of market that's available to you as you're working through pro forma and as you're looking at how you're going to operate these buildings in the future. I will also just want to call attention to, I've highlighted the maximum allowable LIHTC rent limit. Again, we'll go through that later, but there are some restrictions, and when the IRS and the LIHTC program refer to maximum allowable rents and income limits, they mean maximum allowable. And so that's in place through 2030. The improvements on this project, we want to tell you that we did a third party, and I'll get to this in another slide as well. We did a third party scope of the buildings and determined what we would be able to invest in the project, and able to then, recoup at sale. So all of these buildings have gotten or are getting new roofs. All of these buildings are getting new windows. All of these buildings are getting mechanical plant upgrades. So that means either a boiler or furnaces and hot water heaters. In some instances, because it was called out in the independent assessment, we're doing some structural work, or we're doing some work on the foundation, or we're doing some tuck pointing. So we're making almost a $1.8 million investment in these properties before we are selling them. And we chose to do that because those are the kinds of investments that we were not expecting a new emerging developer to necessarily have the cash flow from the project or the balance sheet to be able to handle. And as I said, that comes to about $1.8 million. We have a revolving fund that we were able to fundraise for to allow us to do that work up front. And as I said, we're trying to recoup that money at sale. And part of the reason that we have asked our lenders to forgive interest is so that we could afford to invest in these properties before we were putting them on the market. The unit detail will give you the unit mix and the square footages. With regard to the square footages in the duplexes, because we did do a broker's opinion of value rather than appraisal, I just want to let you know that those are estimated square footages on the units in the duplexes. We will be doing property walkthroughs, which I'm glad all of the realtors are here today. This first set of walkthroughs are only on the schedules that we have provided. So we've put together a calendar where our realtors are offering 2 different days over 2 different weeks, where they will be doing essentially a broker's open. At that point in time, we will be able to have folks that are interested in these buildings take a walk through the common areas, take a walk through them, take a look at the mechanical rooms, and likely 50% of the units in the building we will have available, although they are occupied, for you to see kind of what the condition of the building is. Once we actually have identified a buyer for a building, this is just another caveat that's not in the screen here, but once we have identified the buyer for the building, when we're in that due diligence period with regard to the sale, we certainly will make sure that the prospective buyer can get in and see all of the units and the conditions at that point in time. It is important to know as well that once we've made the improvements to the buildings, that we are selling these in as-is condition. Let's go to the next slide here. All right. Kind of gone through this already because it just thrills my heart. As I said, we have established the sales prices based on an appraisal or broker's opinion of value that were completed in April of 24. We did have a third-party consultant identify a scope of improvement. we determined from that scope of improvement what we could reasonably afford to do, and then again recoup from the sale. And the construction scope and budget were created in June and July of 24, and we are now in the process with the construction team of making the improvements. I believe the flat roofs are completed. We're working on shingle roofs this week and next. The windows have been ordered. The mechanical systems are getting ready to go in. It's just really exciting work for these projects or for these buildings. Like I said, kind of gone through already what the work on all buildings is, and on a select set of buildings where it was required. We are also doing siding replacement at one building, structural repairs in a couple of them, tuck pointing and foundation repairs, and then gutters and drainage. Once again, just want to drive home the point that these are being other than these improvements, these buildings are being sold in as-is condition. All right, let's go to the next slide. The submission requirements, again, were handed out in the packets that we put together and distributed on Monday. They're also available on the website. The minimum requirements will be a completed proposal form, or the RFQ, proof of minority business ownership. We've got just kind of detailed here, just essentially what that means. A written property management plan, either as a separate document or included in the body of the RFQ, wanting to understand how folks understand that these buildings will be managed. And I think that will include everything from sort of what your business and financial plan are, but also a basic understanding of what managing residential property means in having residents in a building, and leasing units, and tenant management plans. We are looking for a completed property bid sheet, also included in the packet from Monday. We are looking for a letter of interest or a commitment letter from a first mortgage lender. As part of the package, that when you submit the requirement, or when you submit by early next month, and any kind of supporting documentation that you find necessary to illuminate your proposal. It could be a balance sheet or other liquidity measurement, a real estate license, maybe your resume, connections to the communities, let us know why you're interested in these buildings, how they sort of work into your bigger plan. I think what we're trying to say here with this bullet point is, tell us who you are, tell us what your vision is. Whether you are a developer who's already got a few units under your belt, or you're a brand new developer, as far as we're concerned, that playing field is relatively level, or is level, and we want to know what your interest is, what your background is, and really what your vision is. So feel free to put as much of that in the RFQ as you feel comfortable sharing with us. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Need to drive home the fact, once again, that this is a set of buildings that are permanent residential, affordable residential housing through the low-income housing tax credit program. Again, for those of you who may not know much about it, that means that it is monitored by the IRS. It was a program that was put together really as a community reinvestment act in the late 80s and kind of refined in the 90s. It means that these buildings come with income restrictions on new households moving in through 2030. Households need to qualify at 60% of AMI or less in terms of what their earning capacity is, and that would be their income and any kind of interest on their assets if they have substantial assets. We find that most of our households have relatively good income. Not a lot of folks have assets that really throw qualification that throw them into a category where they don't qualify. There are rent restrictions on all of these households through 2030. And what I mean by that is that you as a buyer have to keep rents at a certain level or below through 2030. And again, I'll go through a calculation to explain that a little bit more in a little more detail. At move-in, this is another important point. At move-in, so let's say we sell the building, there's a vacant unit, you are leasing it to a new household. You not only need to make sure that that household is income qualified, but as the owner, you will need to do a third-party verification. And create essentially something that resembles a tax return for a household. It's called a tenant income certification. And what you will be doing is certifying by a third party what a household's income is, whether it's from an employer or it's from Social Security or it's from a contribution from a family member. You'll need to get third-party verification, which means that the resident can't just bring it to you. You need to actually request this information from a third party. Then you'll create the certification. There are training programs out there that will help get you trained on how to do a tenant certification. And we'll provide that information to you a little later in this presentation. But there are folks, organizations that will help get you ready to do this kind of thing, but just know that you will have to actually do it. You also will have to annually have households certify that they are income eligible on an annual basis through 2030. The in-place tenant self-certification is a much easier process. There's no third-party verification. You just need to make sure that you've got the information back from the household and that it is then annually reported to MHFA. Again, through 2030. So that's roughly a handful more annual reports that will need to be done. Again, there are organizations and resources that will help you do that kind of work and help you get accustomed to knowing what you need to do. And I would also go out on the limb and say that PPL, we have a pretty substantial compliance department, and we're also here ready to both answer any questions you have while we're in this RFQ process, as well as here to support you once the buildings have sold. So that you won't be alone in this, but it's just important for you to understand that this is part of the program through 2030. Let's go ahead to the next slide here, Danielle. Again, just getting you familiar for those of you that aren't as to how this program works. As I mentioned, it's the Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program known as LIHTC. It is administered by the IRS. It has a deed, these buildings all have deed restrictions on them, which is called a LURA, or a land use restriction agreement, which just says either PPL or anybody that we sell to keeps these buildings affordable for a 30-year period with rents at 60% or less of AMI and income for incoming households for folks that qualify at 60% of area median income. It was meant to be permanent and permanent residential housing. So at least in the near term, these buildings cannot be turned into an Airbnb or leasing to visiting nurses, but they really do need to be a household an affordable household, a household that needs affordable housing, I should say it that way, needs to be their permanent home during the duration of the LURA. Let's see, rents, as I said, I'm hitting this again. In terms of the, oops, what are we doing here? Okay, we're back here.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I guess I've covered this page. I've kind of ad nauseum kind of gone through what those restrictions are. Let's go to the next page. Area median income is established by HUD and is found on the MHFA website. And what it does, area median income is figured at 60% of well, median income for the metropolitan area for a household of four. And then the HUD and MHFA will then determine by household size what a 60% or a 50% of area median income households income looks like. The sources for this information are found on the MHFA website, as well as the maximum rental amounts that can be charged. And one more piece of information is that when we are creating a maximum rent for a unit, the IRS and HUD require that we take into account the average utility amount that a household would be paying for, say, a 2-bedroom unit. And that would be perhaps gas heat if they have their own furnace, electric cooking for their appliances, and electric for their just general household use. We back that out from the maximum area, from the maximum allowable in rent, so that the household, in theory, has enough money in their monthly budget to cover both their rent and their utilities so that their housing is not jeopardized. Let's go to the next page here. So this information is pulled from the combination of the MHFA website and a housing link for the utility allowances. We were just trying to show you here what 60% of area median income looks like for different sized households. So that first chart is the income for a 1-person to a 6-person household. 1 person at 52,500, or a 6-person household of 86,940. A good amount of income, but certainly not upmarket. But these are the maximum amounts of income that households may earn when they move into the building. I should say that once households are in the building, if their annual incomes rise above these levels, there is no impact to the household. You do not need to ask them to move, and it does not change their rent. But simply that the IRS is wanting to make sure that folks moving in to the building qualify, and then hopefully this will be used as a stepping stone for as a stability for the future, and that their income, and household circumstances will change and perhaps improve. The MHFA website also tells us what the gross rent is for a unit, and we differentiate between gross and maximum allowable for rents in the tax credit program. The gross is what 30% of 60% income. Danielle, can you maybe bring us back to the slide?
Hey, Leslie, I'm going to stop sharing because I'm just hearing that you guys aren't seeing the full screen. So just 1 second.
Okay. While she's bringing that back up, rents are established, the gross rent is established as a 30% of the 60% in rent of what am I trying to say, affordable to a household at 60% of AMI. So the rents aren't insubstantial at 60%. A 1-bedroom is 1406. A 4-bedroom currently would rent at 2,173 a month. The utility allowances come from, and I'm sorry, and that information again you'll find on the MHFA website. Come to one of our trainings, we'll show you exactly how to find that. The utility allowance is established, again, essentially by HUD, or in this case, by the local housing authority, MPHA. This information is found on the Housing Link website. We've also provided that information later in the slide presentation. And we were just trying to give you a representative idea of what the average utilities might be for a 1 to a 4 bedroom unit. So you'll see here that we're suggesting in this case that a unit is going to pay for its gas heat. It's going to pay for its cooking electric, and it's just general electric in the building or in the unit. And so the 1 bedroom unit has a total utility allowance of 98, or 120 for a 2 bedroom, and on up. And then that information is backed out of the gross rent. We'll go to the next slide here now, to give us what our maximum allowable rent is for a household. So just example, gross rent on a 1 bedroom is, we know it's at 1406. We know we have a utility allowance of 98 that we need to allow the household to, we need to presume that the household's utilities are going to be at least that amount. And so we subtract that from the gross rent to come up with a maximum allowable rent. So what was a 1406 is really 1306 for that 1 bedroom unit at the 60% of area median income. And these are maximum rents for the 60% unit in this example. I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions about that, and we can revisit that at the end of the presentation. We're getting close. Let's go to the next slide. Compliance resources and training resources. There are a number of organizations, and there are more of them than this, but we wanted to list some of the good local trainers for tax credit training. Affordable Housing Connections is also a monitoring agent, although not for these buildings. They're located in St. Paul. Jan Ken Housing Solutions also does a great introduction to the tax credit program for folks that need to understand, both what the program's history and the reasoning, the rationale and reasoning behind it, as well as how to operate a tax credit project. Spectrum Enterprises is somebody who do really great trainings. They're not local, but keep your eyes open for trainings from them. And then MHFA also do regular trainings, and their website has a lot of information that will be helpful to you. And then I mentioned that there is annual reporting. There's an annual reporting requirement to Minnesota Housing Finance Agency through 2030. And we wanted to give you some resources for folks that either can walk you through that or perhaps even do it for you. Town Management is a local organization who do tax credit compliance work, meaning they can work on your files. They could get that third-party verification for you. They could do self-certifications for you. They could manage that whole process and do the reporting. And then MHFA is is the Minnesota Housing Finance website that also just has all of the detail, all of the information. They do port trainings and whatnot so that you know what it is that you're required to do. So you'll want to hang on to that information as well. And then I think, Danielle, are we at the end of the presentation? I don't know that there's any more slides.
No, that's it.
All right, so let's go ahead and open this up for questions.
I have a question, Leslie.
Sure.
This is Mino. So on the criteria, I think it was shared in the first 4 slides. It talked about the buyer needing to have some experience in the rental market and or investment, etc. If we had someone who's, aside from all that, eligible and has a contract with the property management, whether it be me personally, or it could be a property management company. Could that support that requirement?
I'm going to ask Leah to help weigh in here. So what you're saying is there's somebody who owns property now, or they would,
This would be their first
their
investment,
first
right?
property, but they would have property management,
Correct.
third party.
To support them. And so they don't have that qualifying experience, but this is their first opportunity to obtain that experience. You know what I mean? For having an investment. So I think that question alone is so important, just because a lot of the reach, or I shouldn't say a lot, but there is a good amount of reach going out, and responses coming from people who have never owned a multifamily, and who are really looking at it as a serious investment and may otherwise qualify for everything else, but they just don't have that multifamily experience.
Leah, could I throw that question your way?
Sure. We did talk about that in our, in our strategy meetings, our planning meetings, and and yeah, individuals that have not had that experience are also encouraged to apply. Um, there are a number of resources, as Leslie pointed out, in terms of organizations that could support those applicants or those individuals to learn more about property management and as well as compliance. They would need to be able to prove on their application that that was an intention that they had to pursue,
Mhm.
so that they could address the gap related to their own individual experience or knowledge base. But definitely they could apply and should apply.
Okay, that sounds good, because I say this only because I think that with property management software that's available out there too,
Mhm.
sometimes it's just, a little coaching, right? And then they can get on their feet with that, because they've made some user-friendly property management software out here, but in addition to the supportive resources. Okay, so in essence, this does not mean that people cannot apply if they don't have that experience. I got it. Thank you.
Correct. One of the things that we want to make sure that we're doing is we want to set people up for success. So it's not just about selling these properties, not just about the transaction. It's about the long-term success of every individual that acquires one of these properties. So it's really going to be important in their application and their response for them to demonstrate that they understand or they're committed to their own success, and that they are aware of other resources. They should identify those, whether it is some sort of online platform that they're going to follow, and or if there is a third-party property management firm, or if there is like Minnesota Housing, if they're going to seek any kind of support that they may offer around training and the like. So that's going to be a real important response for them, or they need to make sure that we're really clear on that they're clear that that is a skill set or knowledge or experience that they lack, but that they're going to address that by doing these things, and listing or identifying specifically what they're going to do in order to set themselves up for success in this in managing their properties.
Understood. I have one additional question. So if if an investor acquires property and has a turnover, let's say of 1 or 2 units, somebody moves on. Is there a partnership with PPL in which perhaps your pipeline of folks and families who are looking for housing, we may be able to tap into that so that we can, again, meet that 60% AMI during this 10-year, next 10-year requirement?
That's a really good question. And I don't quite know how I ought to answer that. Certainly PPL wants to be a partner in the success of these buildings. And I would assume that we would be willing to, to direct people to the owners for these buildings if we were aware of a vacancy. But I would need to get back to you on something real definitive, how that process would work.
Yeah, I think that'd be a really good partnership because then they're
Absolutely.
able to fulfill, yeah, the need of housing. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Either that or we can certainly help people understand how to market these, available units as well.
Right.
Where we go, where that market can be found, that kind of thing. So at the very least, we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Leslie and Leah, question for you. If somebody lives in another state, used to live in Minnesota, still has ties to Minnesota, but does not have a Minnesota business entity, does that need to be established, or could they still purchase the units under their out-of-state business entity?
Leah, what is
They
your take?
will, yeah, they would need to have a in-state
Yeah.
business entity.
Leslie, there's a couple questions in the chat. One is that, does this program support mixed use? Mixed income model, assuming a specific percentage is allocated for affordable housing?
These projects were based on they're old tax credit projects. So income averaging is not a program that can be used on these for the rest of the life of the LURA. So not mixed use until after 2030. And must be 60% of AMI rental through that time. Once the LURA restriction lifts, as I said, there's some protection for existing households in the building at that point in time. But for any future tenant or any future vacancy, it's really the owner can do whatever they wish to do after that point in time.
Great. Another question is, you might cover this in the presentation, but are we going over leases pending, eviction skips, and legal? And is there a support with compliance and annual recertification training in place?
That's a lot of questions. Let's break it down. The first question, or the first piece of that was
going over leases pending, eviction skips, and legal.
In terms of training, we do have it. We don't have a slide here today, but we do have a training schedule, both pre and post acquisition, where we will be going over doing some basic training on property management. At that point in time, we will have resources available for you for other programs that will train you in how to manage projects. Of course, when we sell the building, the rent roll, the leases, the tenant ledgers will all be available to the buyer to take a look at. So I don't know if that's actually answering the question, but it'll be eyes wide open for the buyer in terms of, you know, what the tenant makeup is, what their payment history has been, you know, what their lease term is, that kind of thing. As well as all of the income history will come.
Great. If the person who's
That
doing
was the
that
question of the
question
month,
needs
now
any
there was a couple
clarification.
more, right?
Say that again, Leslie.
Was there another question in that chat?
I think you answered that one. There was one more question about when the last HUD inspection might have been. Do you know that information?
These projects aren't subject to HUD inspections. They have been subject over the years to MHFA or home inspections. The home requirements were lifted, as I said, several years ago. But I do know that MHFA is making one final inspection that they're trying to get scheduled between now and when we actually sell these buildings. Just sort of as their farewell to PPL and also making, you know, an inspection prior to a sale. I can also tell you that in the households where we have tenant-based vouchers, so folks that have come to us with subsidy through, say, MPHA, we have to do a housing quality standard inspection on those households, both at move-in and annually thereafter, in order to maintain the subsidy contract. So there are several of those in the building, and so they've met housing quality standards. And we typically, when we turn units, so any of the vacant units right now would also have to pass that standard.
Great. That was the only ones I got from direct message.
We've got time if we want to open it up for folks that have other questions with that aren't in the chat. Well, look at that. I hope we were effective. I hope that you've gotten the information that you needed. If not, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll either respond to questions on the website, or, you know, we'll give you a call and talk through things. We're here to, you know, the whole group of us are here to be supportive, to answer questions about the RFP, to answer the questions about the buildings, and to, well, to make this as you know, as helpful and as effective and as successful for the buyers of these buildings as we possibly can. So, Leah, do you have anything else you'd like to say before we close, or Henry?
I'll say thank you for attending, and we look forward to working with everybody.
And someone just asked about training opportunities. I'm going to capture all the emails from this meeting, and I will send all training opportunities out to that group as they come up. So, you know, feel free to decline them, but if you're interested, you will get that information as we go along.
And then Leah, I think you were saying something, but you were on mute. We wanted to make sure we heard you.
Yeah. I wanted to echo what Henry said, that will be available to support any and everyone, but also relative regarding training, we did have a calendar that was in the packet, and I think that that is going to be on the website as well. So to Danielle's point, in addition to her sending out additional training, we're going to have the calendar listed. We're also working and negotiating with another organization to provide us with a broader base of training for these for the developers around business. With the understanding that each one of them owns and operates a business, and that this investment is a part of their business strategy. We're trying to find a qualified trainer that we can work with and influence around offering, business success training, how to leverage your assets, that sort of thing, so that, again, that's a part of the long-term success. We know that all of these developers have an interest and a commitment to actually creating the structure or the platform for generational wealth, and so, you've got to have a plan to do that. You've got to have a strategy to do that. So that'll be a future offering, but future being in 2025, early 2025. So stay tuned for that as well.
Might I also, Irene, I see that you're still here. I'm wondering if you might want to say something a bit about the Performa training that you'll be offering for folks to put together a real estate Performa as part of the RFQ.
Yep, absolutely. So DMHF is offering a free Performa training. It will be held on September 20th. It's a Friday. It will be an in-person training in St. Paul at the Wellstone Community Center on the west side of St. Paul. It's from noon until about 3 p.m. So not a full day, but a good chunk of time to really dive into the information that you need in order to evaluate whether it's one of these reseed properties or other small NOAA properties. What information do you need to put together your pro forma? How do you put the pro forma together? And then once the pro forma is complete, how do you evaluate that? And in the packet of information that was given at the launch on Monday, my name and email address are in there. So feel free to shoot me an email if you'd like the registration link for the pro forma training on September 20th.
Perfect, thank you. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for your interest in this project and in these buildings. We're thrilled to be working with you all. So looking forward to it. Oh, did I just see somebody had a hand up? Matt Schuster. No, guess not. All right. Well then, thank you for your time.
Thank you all.
Thank you.